Hello everyone and welcome to the video. You are live with Endeavor Gaming, and today we're going to be taking a look at a torpedo build on the all-new Norway class in Star Trek Online. So let's just go on ahead and get into it. Here we are back in Star Trek Online. So as I said, we're going to take a look at a torpedo build I have loaded up on the brand new Norway class Command Strike Wing Escort. So let's get started. Starting with the build, if you guys have already seen my video on the new command carrier, you'll see a lot of things sort of pulled over from there. This build is pretty close, though it focuses a little bit more on tactical and a little bit less on carrier stuff and science stuff, obviously. So starting out, we've got a pretty similar setup. We have the enhanced bimolecular photon torpedo, very hard-hitting torpedo, especially on high yield. The dark matter quantum torpedo launcher, again, great torpedo and is a nice two-piece set with the console we'll get to later. The neutronic torpedo, the Delphic distortion torpedo, and then rounding out, we have added the dual overcharged Delphic anti-proton beam bank. So I have this one on here for that two-piece set, which is giving me a nice little boost to my crit chance and crit severity. I didn't use it on the carrier because I didn't have space for it. That one is a 3-3, but since we can fit it, we're going to use it. Moving on to our deflector, it's going to be the same as what we were using on the other ship. We have our deflector rolled for shield cap to feed into debris screen, a console that we'll get to a little bit later. For the impulse, we have the competitive. Obviously, we love that speed boost on firing off our firing modes like torpedo spread, torpedo high yield, fire at will, cannon scatter volley, all of those. And for the last two pieces, we have the disco two-piece. It's great, offers some survivability, and the shield is also giving us some shield cap, which is always appreciated with debris screen. For our aft weapons, we obviously have one less than the carrier has, so we have a bimolecular photon mine launcher from the 8472 reputation, and then the Elite Fleet Journera Tri-Cobalt Mine Launcher. I can also go back and forth with this one a little bit. I could potentially also use this one, the Quantum Mine, but I like the procs off of the Tri-Cobalt one just a little bit more. For our experimental weapon, we have Soliton Wave Impeller. This is a pretty solid experimental weapon. I'm also partial to the Terran Repeating Warhead Launcher. That's a really fun one to use. Voice of the Prophets is also a great one if you have it, but we're going to keep Soliton on for now. Moving on to our universal consoles. First off, we have Lorca's custom fire controls. Again, that nice two-piece set. We're also getting crit chance from this, weapon power setting that we don't need as much, and that awesome shield penetration. Moving on to engineering, we have the ferrofluid hydraulic assembly. Again, this is much more of a just bog standard torp console. You got the recharge time, the auxiliary power is going to help with phase space membrane, and maximum hit points ain't bad. This ship is definitely a little bit squishy compared to some of the ships I'm used to flying, so anywhere I can get it helps. Next, we've got immolating phaser lance off of the demos. This is really just here to proc universal designs, and icing on the cake is it hits like a Mack truck. Rounding out engineering, we have DPRM. Again, needs no real introduction. It's giving you survivability, it's giving you bonus damage, It comes off of the Atlas class, which is a lockbox ship, but if you're going to choose a lockbox ships, this one is pretty high up on my list for this console alone. Moving on to science, we have the Tri-Cobalt Terra Launcher. This is another one of our just doing torpedo damage. It's a fun clicky to use. There's other stuff you could throw in here, but that shield pen is going to be very helpful, as well as the Cat 1 boost to your mine and torpedo damage. Next, we have Tachyon Net Drones. Again, this is going to become a standard on my Phase 3 torpedo builds. Boost the crit chance and crit severity. The perception's not going to help as much, but the clicky for it is pretty useful. It's going to take down damage resistance rating of your enemies that you catch in it. Very useful in an ISE to use on the Alpha or in the Gateway when you've got all the spheres and stuff, assuming you've got a gravity well, which this ship does. Next, we've got Ordnance Accelerator. Again, this is just torpedo passives. Comes from the Gamma reputation. We have Phased Space Membrane. This is an absolutely awesome one. Comes from the, I want to say it was either the Ober's console or the other one from that bundle, but its clicky is a ton of fun. Gives you bonus damage as long as you can keep your aux power up. And that's bonus damage to your torpedoes, so it was destined for this build. It's a great console. I really like it. Again, the big thing is you gotta keep up your auxiliary power, which is why in the devices we have that auxiliary battery large in there. And then, we've got the kinetic amplifiers, Tyrium surplus, not overly surprising. Moving on to our tactical consoles, we have Swarmer Matrix. Again, passives for our torps, projectile weapon training. We have Debris Screen. This console is basically just an ultra powerful ramming speed that feeds off of our shield capacity. This is the console that's replaced Agony Redistributor on all of my builds, and it's so much fun. It comes off of the new Courier Pilot Raider. And in these last two spots, I actually did something different from the carrier. I decided to use binaural infusion circuits and tachykinetic converter, basically just for the crits and for the little bump up for my control expertise so that my grav wall hits just a little bit harder. And because it's just a whole lot of fun, I threw on the Valkyrie fighters. You wouldn't really ideally use these in ISEs, but they are a ton of fun to use, and in PvE content, I think you guys will enjoy them. Moving on to our traits, a lot of this is basically going to be the same as what it was on the carrier video, so if you want to check that out, the link should be up in the corner. Starting off, we have our personal space traits. We've got Good Day to Die, great one. We have Context is for Kings, which is either going to give us bonus damage or damage resistance based on whether or not we took damage in the previous second. We have Anchored. This is going to encourage us to sit still so we can get some bonus damage the longer we sit. Fleet Coordinator. If you're running an ISEs, this is a great one to throw on. You'll get up to 10% bonus damage, assuming that you're running with a full team. We have Intelligence Agent Attaché, which on weapon critical strikes is going to give us a little bit of extra recharge to our captain abilities, which is great for things like Alpha or relocate mines, all of those good things. We have Superior Projectile Training. Again, Cat 2, bonus projectile weapon damage. Can't go wrong there. We have Unconventional Systems. This is a big one, and I mentioned it in my carrier too. Using a control bridge officer ability gives a minus 7% recharge to universal consoles, and we will get into the abilities that we have on the ship that do that a little bit later. Next, we have Terran Targeting Systems, really just for a boost to our critical severity. We have Resonating Payload modification. Again, this is just going to add a little bit of a debuff to our torpedoes. And then lastly, we have Boimler. There's no reason to not use this on a build if you have it, and it's made it so I don't have to throw on a Photonic Officer, and I haven't had to run Oxtabat in a while. Moving on to our starship traits. First up, we have Universal Designs. When we activate our Universal consoles like Immolating Phaser Lance, we're getting crits, and because that thing has 6 charges, we can build up stacks pretty quickly. Next, we have Entwined Tactical Matrices. This is going to help us keep our torp spreads up every time we do not have a torpedo high yield going off. We have Superior Area Denial. This one was a holdover from the carrier. If you don't have Superior Area Denial and you just have the Norway, in this case you could use something like Checkmate or Ceaseless Momentum. Both of those would work really well in place here too. Next, we have Subspatial Warheads. And this is pretty much a done deal. Every time you have a high yield torpedo, it's going to form a subspace tear that will do extra physical damage. Next, we have Advanced Precision Guided Munitions off of the Cabot class. This is basically the same. When you have a weapon mode activation, it's going to deal extra kinetic damage with the next torpedo weapon, which is so very great. And then lastly, we have Rapid Emitting Armaments. This I'm throwing onto all of my torpedo builds. When we activate Tractor Beam, it's 15% bonus torpedo weapon damage and shoots off 3 heavy plasma torpedoes that will do a ton of damage, as well as having a nice plasma DOT. Moving on, this is also going to be pretty similar to the carrier, but we've got Tyler's Duality giving us some crit chance. If your hull isn't as high, you might want to switch this out for something else, but that is entirely up to you. We have Omega Kinetic Shearing, again, just adding some extra damage to our torpedoes. Magnified Firepower, again, for that bonus damage. We have Torpedo Pre-Fire Sequence, which, again, is going to give us some bonus torpedo damage. And then lastly, Advanced Targeting Systems for the critical severity. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have our Active Space Reputations. You can choose these as you see fit. I'm using Anti-Time, Biomolecular Shield Generator, Quantum Singularity in case I'm taking too much aggro, and the Tethered Non-Baryonic Asteroid for when I want to pull things from the left side of the map to the right side of the map. Moving on to our bridge officers. Again, I have a lot more SROs loaded up here, so let's go through these abilities because they are a little bit different. First, we have Viral Impulse Burst. This is our first unconventional systems proc, and it's basically the only reason I have it. Next, we have Dispersal Pattern Beta 1 for our mines. This is just going to help us get out more mines, more damage, more winning. Moving on, we have another SRO here, and this is our command seat. So we have Beam Spiral 1 to give us a torpedo spread, Cannon Scatter Volley 1 to give us a torpedo spread, Concentrate Firepower 3 because you want that extra kinetic damage as well as giving those high yields out, and then we have Call Emergency Artillery. I would always recommend using these two on a command torp build. There's basically no reason not to. These are the two I tend to go with. Next, we have another SRO here. Use this loaded up with our Chemosite Laser Weaponry 1 and our Torpedo High Yield 2. I would have liked to have High Yield 3 on here, but it would have meant giving up Concentrated Firepower 3, so we bumped it down to a 2, and we'll see how it does. Now we have our Engineering SRO, who has Emergency Power to Engines for some extra speed, as well as Emit Unstable Warp Bubble. This is another one of our Unconventional Systems proc. And then lastly, we have a Pirate in our Science Seat. All of this is Unconventional Systems. We have Tractor Beam, Jam Targeting Sensors, and Gravity Well. Moving on to our Duty Officers, this is another one that's pretty well set up and pretty similar to the last one, albeit with a couple of changes for the specializations. We have the Projectile Weapons Officer that will give us a chance to reduce the time to recharge torpedoes. We have 32 of 47, so this is a Science Intel 1 for crit severity and exotic damage, which should help with our Gravity Wells. This is a holdover from the other build too. 20% chance of gaining plus 10 to crit severity for 15 seconds. Next we have our Con Officer. When we activate emergency powered engines, we'll recharge evasive maneuvers. So basically, speed boost helps us get the other speed boot back faster. It's a win-win. Next we have 28 of 47. This is a Science Command 1. I'm pretty sure this was also on the last build, but chance to improve maximum hull by 10 seconds for the entire team or exotic damage. And then lastly, we have 23 of 47, who is Tactical in Command, which again is max hull and then critical chance. Now that we've gone through the build, let's take the ship into combat and see how it performs.
Looks like our fight got them to notice us. Let's go over and ask if their boss might come out of hiding. Keep concentrating fire on individual ships. Separate them and whittle down their numbers. We will not go quietly. your assistance. We've recently come across the remains of a battlefield. We have the suspect in custody now.
So, once again, no major problems getting through that TFO or getting through that patrol. Now, let's take it into something a little bit more difficult. Let's go into a rescue and search and see how its survivability stacks up.
Good to see. Warning, ship is under attack. We did it. Klingon vessels are warping into your position.
That rift's unstable. We need to hurry or their ship will be
Thank you. Truly.
Our systems are
under.
it.
That's one less rift to worry about. Let's revisit the marker.
Bad news, I'm afraid. Klingons are approaching our position. Target change has failed. cost of indeed.
Wow, the Norway definitely did not have a problem getting through that patrol either. But I believe one more test is in order, so let's just go on ahead and bring it to an ISE to see how it performs.
The situation is grim. Scanning the nanite transformer. Additional data information. The nanite probe can repair the transformer. Stop them. The probe is closing in on the transformer. Destroy it.
I'd say that ISE went very well. As you can see, this ship performed very well. Managed to get 593.5k in a 4-man ISE. This was a pug run and not a setup run in any way. But overall, I think it performed very well. The Norway class has impressed me. This entire bundle, honestly, I ended up enjoying a lot more than I thought I would. Both this and the Seneca class are very solid ships, and if you're going to go after a bundle in the Zen store, I definitely recommend this. I'd rate the Seneca in terms of its damage at around 7 out of 10. It's a solid ship. It still loses points because carriers are not as good as something like a flight deck carrier. And for survivability, I'd probably also get it a 7 out of 10, maybe a 7.5 because it's got, things like Turn the Tide. And in the case of the Norway, I would give its damage output an 8.5 out of 10. It's got a very good setup. That 5-2 plus 1 weapon setup is so much fun. It's got pretty good seating for a Zen store ship, and for survivability, I would also give it a 7 out of 10. Maybe a 6. Towards the end there, I definitely was taking a little bit of damage and I had to go on the defensive a little bit, but still very solid. So, what do you think of the bundle? Let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button to get alerted of when new videos hit the channel. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day, and as always, you have been live with Endeavor Gaming, and remember to keep calm and game on.